Tonight, we are going down. Not falling. Nothing about tonight involves falling. We are going to sink, the way a leaf sinks in still water, the way dust settles in an empty room. Slowly, without effort, without any possibility of hurry. This is Cosmos at midnight. And tonight we are answering one of the oldest questions a person can ask while standing at the edge of the sea. How deep does it really go? I will tell you now at the start so your mind can stop reaching for it. The deepest place in the ocean lies almost 7 miles down, nearly 11 kilometers of water, stacked on top of itself, black as the space between stars for most of the way. If you took the tallest mountain on Earth and set it down in that spot, its summit would still be more than a mile beneath the waves. That is where we are going tonight, all the way to the floor of the world. And we are going to take the entire night to get there, because the fastest thing in the deep ocean is slower than the slowest part of your day, and by the time we arrive, you will almost certainly be asleep. You will be asleep long before the bottom. That is not a failure. As always, that is the plan. Before we sink, we begin where every journey into the sea begins, at the edge. Picture a beach at night. Any beach you have ever loved will do. The sand is still holding a little of the day's warmth. The sky above is thick with stars, and where the sky ends, the sea begins, breathing in and out against the shore, the way it has breathed for 4 billion years. 7 or 8 waves a minute. It is the oldest rhythm on Earth. Every person who has ever lived and every creature that has ever crawled has kept time, knowingly or not, to that same slow pulse. Walk down to the waterline. Let the last wave run up over your feet. The water is cool, but not cold. And here is the first quiet miracle of the night, one we never think about. This water is continuous. The water touching your ankles right now touches everything. It wraps around the whole planet in one single, connected body. The wave at your feet has, in some traveled and mingled sense, been everywhere. It has been rain on mountains that no longer exist. It has been locked in glaciers and breathed out by forests. And it has rested, for thousands of years at a stretch, in the deepest trenches of the Pacific, in perfect darkness, before rising again to meet your feet on this beach tonight. The ocean is one thing, and tonight we are simply going to walk into it and keep going. So step forward. The water rises to your knees, your waist, warm at the surface, where the sun has been all day. This top layer of the sea, the part we swim in, the part we know, is like the skin on an apple, thinner than thin, almost nothing. And yet nearly everything we picture when we say the word ocean lives in this bright margin. Let your feet leave the sand. You will not need them again tonight. From here on, there is no swimming, no effort. Tonight you are not a swimmer. You are a passenger. You are one of those small pale flakes we spoke of in an earlier episode, the slow snow of the sea, drifting down through the water at its own unhurried pace. Whatever the water wants to do with you, it will do gently. The rule of the night is simple. Every time you breathe out, we go a little deeper, and nothing on the way down will startle us. I promise you now, and I will keep the promise. The deep ocean has a fearsome reputation, and tonight you will find out how undeserved it is. There are no monsters where we are going, only neighbors. Strange, soft, patient neighbors, most of them smaller than your hand, all of them minding their own business in the dark, as they have for 100 million years. So breathe out, and let the surface close over the top of you like a blanket being drawn up. We are 1 meter down. The journey to the deepest place on Earth is 10,935 meters long. We have 10,934 to go. And the night is young, and the water is warm, and there is absolutely nothing you need to do about any of it. Down we go. The first 200 meters of the sea have a lovely name. Scientists call this the Sunlight Zone because it is the only part of the entire ocean that daylight ever truly reaches. Everything below it, which is to say almost all of the ocean there is, lives in the dark. But we are not there yet. Up here, in the bright skin of the sea, the water is full of light and full of company. Drift down through the first 10 meters. If it were day, the light around you would be pure tropical blue, and it is worth pausing to ask why. Sunlight arrives at the surface carrying every color at once. But water is a thief with very particular taste. It steals the reds first. Within the first 10 meters, most of the red light has been absorbed, swallowed, turned into the faintest whisper of warmth. Orange goes soon after. Then yellow. By the time you are 30 or 40 meters down, the world has been edited to blues and greens, and everything red down here, and there are red creatures, wears the color secretly. A red shrimp at 40 meters looks black. Its brilliant scarlet coat is a costume that can only be seen by flashlight, and no flashlight is coming. The deep has already begun teaching its first lesson. Color is a gift of the surface, and the sea gives it up quietly, shade by shade, as you sink. 20 meters down now. This is about as deep as an ordinary person with a mask and fins can comfortably go, and it is the floor of the postcard ocean. Coral gardens live at these depths, and seagrass meadows, and the bright confetti of reef fish. Nearly everything we photograph, nearly everything we mean when we say how beautiful the sea is, happens in this first sliver, this top half of 1% of the ocean's true depth. It is as if humanity had explored the first 2 steps of a staircase 10,000 steps tall, and hung pictures of those 2 steps in every home on Earth. Keep sinking, 40 meters. This is the recommended limit for recreational scuba divers, the edge of the map for most humans who will ever enter the sea. The light is dimmer now, cooler, like late afternoon through blue glass. And here, let me tell you about the people who go deeper with no equipment at all, because their story is one of the most soothing facts I know about the human body. Free divers, people who descend on a single held breath, have reached beyond 100 meters and returned smiling. They can do this because of something folded into every one of us, something ancient. When a human face enters cool water, the body remembers. The heart slows, all on its own. Blood moves inward toward the core, protecting the warm middle of you. The urge to breathe softens. It is called the mammalian dive reflex, and it is standard equipment in every human being. You have it right now, lying in bed. We are, each of us, part seal. The sea kept a copy of the keys when we moved out, all those millions of years ago, and the body still remembers the old house. So as you sink past 50 meters, past 60, understand that some ancient part of you knows exactly what it is doing. The slowing heart, the quieting mind. Your body has been practicing for this descent since before it was born. But wait, it is night, you might say. We entered this ocean under the stars. And that is true, and it earns you a lovely digression, because the sea at night has lights of its own, and you are drifting through them now. Moonlight enters the sea too, in its small silver way. A bright full moon can send its glow a surprising distance down into clear water, a pale ghost of daylight, enough for some creatures to hunt by, enough to cast the faintest moving shadows of the waves across the upper sea, like light through a curtain that never stops swaying. Whole rhythms of ocean life run on the phases of the moon. Corals time their once a year spawning to it. Certain worms rise to the surface only on particular moonlit nights, keeping calendars older than any calendar. The sea does not sleep at night. It simply switches lighting. And in the surface waters of many coasts, on warm dark nights, the water itself seems to remember light. Swimmers move through it and leave trails of blue-green fire. Oars drip sparks. Dolphins come up the coast wrapped in pale flame, and the wake of every fish is written, briefly, in glow. It is the work of countless single-celled drifters that flash when the water stirs them. Seas sparkle, sailors call them, and whole bays in some corners of the world stay lit like this. Night after night, a sky of stars above and a sea of stars below, with only a thin, dark line of horizon to say which is which. You have fallen through that layer tonight. Some of those little lights are still above you, blinking where you stirred them. 100 meters down, the light from the surface is perhaps 1% of what it was. Not darkness yet, but a deep cathedral blue, the blue of the last minutes of dusk. Sounds from the world above, boats, birds, weather are gone. What remains is the great soft hiss of the sea itself, and below that, faint and far away, clicks and moans and low songs. Whales, some of them a whole ocean away. Sound travels farther down here than light ever could, and the sea is not silent. It murmurs to itself, endlessly in every direction, like a sleeping crowd. A humpback whale's song can carry for hundreds of miles through this water. And in a cold, deep layer of the sea that acts like a corridor for sound, the low voice of a blue whale, the largest animal that has ever existed, may travel across an entire ocean basin. Somewhere in the water around you, right now, there are voices arriving from unimaginable distances, passing through you, gentle as a change in pressure, on their way to an ear on the far side of the world. You are floating inside a conversation the size of a planet, and none of it requires anything from you. 150 meters. The blue is failing now, sliding toward slate, toward charcoal, toward a color that has no real name because it is mostly memory. If you looked up, and you would see the surface as a faint silver ceiling, impossibly far away already, though we have barely begun. 200 meters down, here is the border. Below this line, there is not enough light for plants. Not one blade of anything green grows past this point, anywhere on Earth. The entire garden of the sea, all of it, every photosynthetic cell, lives in the 200 meters above your head. Everything below, and there are 10,700 meters below, lives on deliveries. Food made in the light, drifting down. The sunlit skin of the ocean feeds the entire dark body beneath it, the way a small fire in one room can, with patience, warm a very large house. We are leaving the sunlight zone now. Take one look back at the silver ceiling, the way you might glance back at a lit doorway before walking down a long hallway at night. The light has been good company. But the truth is, the ocean is not really a place of light. The bright layer we just fell through is the exception, the anomaly, the thin lid on the jar. The ocean, the real ocean, the overwhelming most of it, is a world of darkness, and it is the largest living space this planet has. By volume, the deep dark water below you is more than 90% of all the room for life on Earth. Which means something worth saying softly. The ordinary condition of life on this planet is not sunshine and meadows. The ordinary condition of life on Earth is cold, dark, quiet water. We, up in the light, are the strange ones. Tonight, for one night, you are going home to the average. Down we go, past the last of the light. Before we cross into the twilight, let us drift for a moment with a question. How does anyone know how deep this water goes? You cannot see the bottom. For most of human history, you could not reach it, could not photograph it, could not even imagine it properly. And yet sailors needed to know the depth beneath their keel the way you need to know there is floor beneath your bed. Their solution was almost childishly simple, and people used it for thousands of years. You tie a weight to a rope and you lower the rope, and when the weight stops pulling, you measure how much rope went out. That is all. A weight, a rope, and patience. The weight was usually a lump of lead with a hollow in its base, and sailors pressed sticky tallow into the hollow so that a little of the seafloor, sand, shell, gray mud would come back up stuck to it. A postcard from the bottom. For thousands of years, that smear of mud on tallow was the only thing any human had ever seen of the deep ocean floor. Close to shore, this worked beautifully. The weight found bottom at 20 meters 50, 100, and the leadsman sang the depths out to the helm in a chant that never stopped. But out on the open ocean, something unsettling happened. Sailors would lower the lead, and the rope would run out, all of it, every fathom aboard, and the weight would just keep going. They tied on more rope. It kept going. Miles of rope on the longest attempts swallowed straight down into the blue, and still, sometimes, no bottom. The line would simply hang there, heavy with its own soaked weight, telling them nothing except that the world beneath them was deeper than their imagination. Some of those early soundings failed in a way I find endearing. The rope itself became the problem. Miles of wet hemp weigh so much that you can no longer feel the moment the lead touches down. Currents bow the line sideways. You are trying to detect one gentle touch, transmitted up through 5 miles of rope, and the rope is lying to you. Whole expeditions returned with depth measurements that were simply wrong, too deep, too shallow, honest guesses wrapped around a heavy line. The deep kept its number to itself. The sea gave up its true shape only when we stopped reaching into it and started listening instead. In the 20th century, ships learned to make a small, sharp sound, a ping, and time its echo off the seafloor. Sound leaves the ship, flies down through the dark at about 1,500 meters every second, touches bottom, and comes home. Half a second down and back means shallow water under you. 10 seconds means you are floating above an abyss. 14 seconds, and you have found one of the deep trenches. The ocean floor, hidden for all of human history, turned out to be legible after all. You just had to ask in its own language, which was never light. It was always sound. And when ships crossed the oceans pinging as they went, the picture that assembled itself astonished everyone. The seafloor was not the flat, featureless basin people had assumed, a simple bowl full of water. Down there in the permanent dark are mountain ranges longer than any on land, a single connected chain of them wandering the globe like a seam on a baseball, 65,000 kilometers of it. There are canyons that would swallow the Grand Canyon without narrowing, plains flatter than any desert. Thousands upon thousands of solitary mountains that rise from the deep floor and never reach the surface, each one an island that never made it, wearing its summit in the dark. An entire hidden landscape, the largest landscape on Earth, sitting quietly under the ships the whole time. And once people knew the deep floor was real, and mappable and reachable by rope, they did something with it almost immediately that still sounds like a fable. They laid a wire across it. In the middle of the 19th century, when the fastest message between Europe and America was a letter on a ship, 10 days at best, engineers proposed to connect the two continents with a single copper cable, wrapped in tarred hemp and iron, laid along the bottom of the entire Atlantic Ocean. Nearly everyone serious said it was impossible. The first attempts snapped, sank, failed, were fished up from kilometers down, spliced by hand on rolling decks, and laid again. And then one summer day in 1858, a queen in London exchanged greetings with a president in Washington, through the dark, along the floor of an ocean, and people lit bonfires in the streets. That first cable failed within weeks. They laid better ones. Those worked for a century. Here is why I tell you this tonight. It never stopped. The wires never left the seafloor. They only multiplied, and tonight, this very night, the deep ocean floor is stitched with well over 1 million kilometers of cable, thin as a garden hose out in the deep water, resting quietly on the same abyssal mud we are sinking toward. And very nearly everything you think of as the internet, the calls, the messages, the videos, some say 99% of all the traffic between continents, travels not through satellites, but through those cables, as pulses of light in glass, in the cold and the dark, past the anglerfish and over the plains. Which means, in all likelihood, that this voice, on its way to you, crossed the bottom of an ocean. These words went down into the dark, ran along the floor of the world for thousands of kilometers, in a thread of glass no thicker than a hair, and came up again and found your room and became sound. You have been connected to the deep sea all your life, every single day, without knowing. Tonight is not an introduction. It is a reunion. It is worth holding that thought as you sink. The deep was never empty. It was never a void. It is geography. It has slopes and valleys and weather of a slow kind. It has landmarks. And tonight, somewhere far below your drifting body, that landscape is waiting, patient as furniture in a dark room, for us to arrive. We will get there, but first we must fall through the longest twilight in the world. From 200 meters down to 1,000, the sea keeps a country called the Twilight Zone. The name is exact. This is the part of the ocean where sunlight fades from almost nothing to absolutely nothing, the longest dusk there is. A beam of light that crossed 93 million miles of space in 8 minutes spends its last strength here, thinning, scattering, giving out photon by photon, until somewhere around 1,000 meters, even the most sensitive eye ever evolved can find no trace of the sun at all. Sink into it slowly, 300 meters. The water around you is the color of deep evening, and it is getting cold now, properly cold, and if you were here in your body, you would feel the pressure of 30 atmospheres holding you from every side at once. Not crushing. Holding. Deep water does not squeeze a relaxed, water-filled creature the way people imagine. It simply holds everything evenly, firmly, from all directions, the way a well-tucked blanket holds a sleeper. The animals of the deep do not fight their pressure any more than you fight the weight of air on your shoulders, which, you might like to know, is about 1 kilogram pressing on every square centimeter of you at this very moment, and always has been, and you have never once noticed. Pressure is only frightening when it changes. Down here, nothing changes. It is the steadiest embrace on Earth. 400 meters. And now, the Twilight Zone begins to show you its one great trick, the thing it does better than anywhere else in the universe that we know of. It makes its own light. Off in the middle distance, a soft blue spark drifts by, then another closer like a slow firefly, then a brief chain of them, a string of pale lanterns switching on one after another and off again. This is bioluminescence, living light, and it is not a rarity down here. It is the ordinary language of the place. In the Twilight Zone, somewhere around 3/4 of all the animals can glow. Little fish with rows of lamps along their bellies like portholes on a night ferry. Shrimp that spit clouds of cold blue fire. Jellies that ripple with rings of light, slow as breathing. Chains of linked creatures, some longer than a whale, hung through the dark like strings of party lights in a garden after everyone has gone to bed. There are more creatures that make light on this planet than creatures that do not. We forget this, living up in the bright layer where the sun does all the shining. But count every living thing, and the glowing ones are the majority. Earth, seen honestly, is a planet of small blue lights in dark water. You are only visiting the suburbs of it tonight. And the light down here is almost all that same color, a soft blue-green, because blue is the color that travels farthest through seawater, and evolution is patient and practical and always finds the cheapest lantern. When these creatures blink, they are speaking. Here I am. Where are you? Go away. Come closer. It is a whole vocabulary, written in light, silent, and older than anything with bones. 500 meters. Let a shape drift past us here at a neighborly distance. A siphonophore. It is one of the strangest and gentlest things in the sea, not one animal but a colony, thousands of tiny specialized bodies linked into a single drifting thread, some parts for swimming, some for feeding, some for glowing, all of them together pretending, very successfully, to be one creature. Some siphonophores grow to 40 meters or more, longer than the blue whale, which makes this loose committee of little glowing beings arguably the longest animal on Earth. It has no brain, no bones, no hurry. It hangs in the dark like a strand of fairy lights, fishing with 10,000 patient hands. It has been doing exactly this, in exactly this dark, for far longer than there have been humans to find it strange. Somewhere near you now, and near every point in the Twilight Zone of every ocean, swim the lanternfish. Small, silvery, unglamorous about the length of your finger, with rows of tiny lights along their sides, and I mention them because they hold a title almost nobody knows about. By sheer numbers, lanternfish are very likely the most abundant backboned animals on Earth. Not pigeons, not rats, not humans, nor our chickens. Little glowing fish in the twilight of the sea, in their hundreds of trillions. If you gathered every wild bird, every mammal, every reptile on land, the lanternfish of the Twilight Zone would outweigh them without noticing. The most typical animal with a spine, the default vertebrate of planet Earth, is a fish the size of your thumb, wearing lights, that you had possibly never heard of until this moment. It is always night where they live, and they are doing wonderfully. Their lights, and the lights of so many of their neighbors, solve a problem you would never think of until you have hung in this water as you are hanging now. In the Twilight Zone, danger looks up. A hunter below you sees your silhouette printed against the faint glow of the distant surface, the one direction that is never fully dark. So the creatures here evolved the gentlest camouflage imaginable. They light their own bellies. Rows of soft photophores, tuned to exactly the color and brightness of the light filtering down from above, so that from below, their silhouette fills in with counterfeit sky and simply vanishes. It is called counterillumination. Half the Twilight Zone is quietly wearing the sky on its stomach. When the light from above shifts, they adjust their glow to match, like someone dimming a lamp to suit the evening. There are war stories and there are lullabies in evolution, and this one, I think, is a lullaby. To survive the long dusk, the animals here became very, very good at impersonating the last of the light. Others took an even simpler road. They became glass. The Twilight Zone is full of creatures that are almost perfectly transparent, animals you could read this page through if there were pages here. Glass squid like blown ornaments, drifting with their organs politely gathered into one small opaque bundle. Swimming snails with transparent wings, called sea butterflies, flickering through the dim like little spells. Eel larvae flat and clear as ribbon, where there is almost no light. One of the best things to be is almost nothing. The deep does not favor armor nearly as much as it favors modesty. 600 meters. I want to tell you now about the commute. Because this zone, this dim country you are falling through, is the setting for the largest movement of animals that happens anywhere on Earth, and it happens every single night, and almost nobody up in the light has ever heard of it. Every evening, as the sun sets on the surface, the Twilight Zone empties upward. Trillions of animals, small fish, shrimp, squid, jellies, creatures beyond counting, in a mass that outweighs every human being alive many times over, rise hundreds of meters toward the surface to feed in the safe darkness of night. And every morning, before the light returns, they sink back down into the gloom to hide from the day. Up at dusk. Down at dawn. A tide of life, breathing in and out of the deep once per day forever. Sailors with early sonar discovered it by accident. Their instruments showed them a phantom seafloor, hundreds of meters up off the true bottom, a floor that rose at sunset and sank at sunrise. They called it the deep scattering layer and puzzled over it for years. It was not rock. It was animals. So many animals that they read as geology. And here is the part I find most restful. That great nightly rising is happening right now. As you lie in your bed in the dark, drifting downward toward sleep, the largest migration on this planet is drifting upward, toward the surface, to eat quietly under the stars. You are passing each other, you and the Twilight Zone, like two slow trains in the night, and both of you will be back tomorrow, and the night after, and the night after that. The world is full of enormous, gentle routines that no one is watching. It does not need us to run smoothly. It never has. You may set that burden down. 800 meters. The last of the sunlight is truly failing now. What reaches you here is not light in any usable sense, just a rumor of the surface, a faint statistical gray in the upward direction, and only if you stare. The cold has settled to a steady chill it will keep for the rest of the descent. The living lights blink around you, near and far, unhurried. 900 meters. If you are still awake, you are doing beautifully, and if you are not, then the Twilight Zone has done for you what it does for the daylight itself. Taken you in, dimmed you gently, and passed you onward, down, into the perfect dark below. 1,000 meters. The last photon of sunlight died somewhere above you. It is midnight now, in the country below the twilight, and midnight here is not a time. It is a place. It has an address, and we have arrived at it. Welcome to the Midnight Zone. From 1,000 to 4,000 meters lies the Midnight Zone, and it is exactly what its name promises. No sunlight has ever reached this water. Not dim light. Not faint light. None. The photons simply do not survive the journey. Every part of the ocean below 1,000 meters has been in absolute darkness since the day it formed, and it will be dark until the sun itself goes out, and even then, frankly, the difference down here will be small. It is also, and this surprises people, the single largest habitat on planet Earth. Most of the living space this world has to offer is exactly this. Cold, black, calm water, far from every coast and every floor. If you chose a point at random inside Earth's biosphere, not on it, but in it, the odds are overwhelming that you would land somewhere like here. Midnight is not the exception on this planet. Midnight is the rule. So float a while in the rule. The temperature has settled to about 4 degrees above freezing, and it will barely change from here to the bottom. The pressure at this depth is 100 atmospheres and climbing as we sink, a ton pressing on every square centimeter, and the creatures around you do not notice it any more than you notice the sky pressing down on your bed. Their bodies are mostly water, and water does not compress. They are not resisting the deep. They are made of it. And the dark is not empty. Let me introduce a few of the neighbors, slowly, one at a time, the way you would point out houses on a quiet street at night. Here is the anglerfish. I know what her reputation is. She has been the poster child for deep-sea horror since the first one came up in a net, all teeth and gloom, and I would like to file a correction on her behalf. First, she is small. The fearsome face you have seen in pictures usually belongs to an animal shorter than your finger. You could hold most anglerfish in a teaspoon. Second, consider her honestly. She hangs perfectly still in the dark, dangling a single soft lantern, which she cannot even light herself. The glow comes from billions of luminous bacteria that live inside the lure, tenants she has carried since she was young, a partnership between a fish and a light she agreed to keep. She does not chase. She does not roam. She waits with the patience of furniture, sometimes for weeks between meals, a tiny round shadow holding up one blue-green star in an ocean of night. She is not a monster. She is a lighthouse keeper. And the sea around her is so vast and so sparse that her little light, seen from a few meters away, may be the only visible thing in any direction. If you were an anglerfish, you would understand loneliness and patience better than any creature alive, and you would never once complain. Drift on, 1,500 meters. Here is a giant squid, passing far off in the dark, and even this famous leviathan deserves a gentler telling than it gets. For centuries it was a sailor's legend, the kraken, and then for more centuries it was a scientific ghost, known only from bodies washed ashore. No human being saw a living giant squid in the deep until the 21st century. Think about that. We photographed the far side of the moon almost half a century before we photographed one of the largest animals on our own planet, alive at home. That is how good the deep is at privacy. And when cameras finally found one, it was not lurking or attacking. It was simply there, immense and silver-eyed, drifting in the dark with its arms gathered, unhurried like a duchess surprised in her own hallway. Its eye is the size of a dinner plate, the largest eye in the animal kingdom, built to gather the faint blue sparks of the deep. The better to see lanterns with. Nothing in the deep sea wants anything from you. Most of it has never seen anything like you, and all of it is busy with its own small, ancient errands. And since we are meeting the neighbors, let me introduce 3 more, because the Midnight Zone keeps some of the gentlest characters on this entire planet, and their reputations, where they have reputations at all, are wildly unfair. Here, hanging in the water at a comfortable distance, is the vampire squid. Yes, that is truly its name. Scientists gave it the most dramatic name in the entire ocean, the vampire squid from hell, on account of its dark webbed cloak of arms and its red-rimmed eyes, huge for its body, the better to gather the last flickers of light. And then, decades later, researchers finally worked out what this dreadful creature actually eats. It eats the snow. It drifts in the still dark, unspooling 2 long sticky filaments like fishing line, gathering the falling crumbs of marine snow, patting them together with its cloak into a little parcel, and dining at leisure on drifted dust. It has no ink. It hardly swims. When frightened, it does not attack. It pulls its cloak over its own head. The vampire squid from hell is a small, shy, snow-eating umbrella, and it would like to be left alone, and after tonight, I hope you will always think of it kindly. A little deeper, along the slopes and floors, waits the Dumbo octopus, and here the scientists made amends, because they named it after the flying elephant in the old cartoon, for the 2 round fins on its head that flap, slowly, like small contented ears. Dumbo octopuses are the deepest living octopuses known, at home even 4 or 5 kilometers down, and they are, objectively, among the most endearing sights the deep has ever shown a camera. A soft round body the size of a guinea pig, pale pink or lavender in the lights, big dark eyes, ear fins gently rowing as it hovers just off the mud, drifting like a small idea that has not decided where to settle. When it finds a worm it wants, it does not pounce. It descends onto it, slowly, like a dropped handkerchief. And out in the open black water, rarest of all, cruises the bigfin squid, and if the deep sea has a resident spirit, it may be this. Cameras on drilling equipment and deep robots have glimpsed it perhaps a few dozen times in all of history, always by accident, always briefly. A small body, and then arms beyond all reason, held out at strange, careful elbows and trailing down in threads that can reach 8 meters, so that the whole animal hangs in the dark like a chandelier of silk or handwriting from an alphabet nobody reads anymore. It drifts along, dangling, touching the water with all 10 of those impossible ribbons, feeling for its small meals, bothering absolutely no one, kilometers below the nearest sunbeam. No one has ever seen one hurry. It may be that nothing has ever seen one hurry. Somewhere below you, one is probably drifting right now, trailing its long, slow cursive through the dark, writing nothing, all night forever. 2,000 meters down, and now, all around you in the dark, the snow is falling. We met it once before in another episode from another angle. Marine snow. The slow rain of soft particles drifting down from the living waters above, flakes of what the surface no longer needs, dust of old plankton, crumbs of distant meals, all of it sinking with immense patience, a few dozen meters a day. A single flake may take weeks to fall from the sunlight to the floor. It is falling past you now, pale in the living lights, unhurried, endless. It has been snowing in the midnight zone without one break for hundreds of millions of years. There is no weather on Earth steadier than this. And it is not bleak, this snow. It is groceries. It is the entire economy of the deep, drifting down like manna, and everything below lives on it and waits for it, and knows, in whatever way a body without a brain can know, that it always comes. Sometimes something larger comes down. Once in a great while in this snow, a whale falls. When a great whale dies at the surface, its body in time begins the same journey you are taking tonight, down through the twilight, down through the midnight, down to the floor. Scientists call it a whale fall, and in the starved economy of the deep it is not a sad thing. It is a festival, and then a village. A single whale delivers, in one arrival, as much food as the falling snow would bring to that patch of floor in many hundreds, some say thousands, of years. The deep responds the way a quiet town responds to fortune. First come the travelers, sharks of the dark, hagfish, crabs, arriving from kilometers around by senses we barely understand. Then come the settlers, worms and mollusks and mats of patient bacteria. A whole community assembles, lives, raises generations. A single fallen whale can support a busy neighborhood of deep sea life for 50 years or more. There are worms, discovered only this century, that live nowhere on Earth except in the bones of fallen whales, which raises a gentle mystery no one has fully answered. The falls are rare and scattered across a floor the size of every continent combined. How do the specialists always find them? Yet they do. Life in the deep is very, very good at finding what it needs in the dark. It has had the time to learn. 3,000 meters. The sperm whales hunt above you somewhere, in this same blackness, a fact I mention because their day is so unlike yours, and it goes on all the same. A sperm whale is an air-breathing mammal, warm-blooded like you, who dives from the sunlit surface into this midnight country on one held breath, the mammalian reflex you own in miniature, scaled up to a 50-ton body. Down in the dark, she hunts by sound, clicking, listening, clicking, reading the echoes the way you are reading this voice, and the loudest animal sound on Earth is hers. Then, an hour later, she rises to the surface, breathes, and naps. Sperm whales sleep drifting bolt upright, in loose groups, hanging in the water like enormous quiet chess pieces, a few meters under the waves. If you could see them now, a family of upright giants dozing in the blue overhead while their planet turns, you would understand that the sea is not a wilderness. It is a bedroom, and it is already full of sleepers, and there has always been room in it for one more. 3,500 meters. The midnight zone is loosening its grip on us now, passing us downward, as every layer of this night eventually does. The snow falls with us. The little lights have grown sparser, the water even stiller. Below lies the widest, flattest, quietest country on this entire planet. 4,000 meters. The floor of the ocean's midnight and the beginning of the abyss. The word abyss is very old. It came into English from Greek, through Latin, and it originally meant, quite simply, without bottom. The bottomless place. It was a word for the thing sailors feared when the rope ran out and kept running. And so there is a small, satisfying irony in what the abyss actually turned out to be. Between 4,000 and 6,000 meters down lies the abyssal zone, and far from being bottomless, it is where the bottom mostly is. More than half of the entire solid surface of planet Earth is abyssal seafloor. Not mountains, not forests, not cities, not beaches. This The single most typical landscape our planet has, the one it makes more of than anything else, is a cold, dark, level plain of soft gray mud, 4 or 5 kilometers underwater. You are drifting down toward the most normal place on Earth. Almost no one has ever seen it. Let yourself settle, slowly, through the last 1,000 meters of open water. The abyssal plains spread out below you now, and flat does not begin to describe them. Away from the mountain seams and the trenches, the deep floor runs level, kilometer after kilometer after kilometer, with slopes so slight a marble would take all day deciding which way to roll. Some abyssal plains are among the flattest surfaces known anywhere, smoothed by a very simple mechanism working for a very long time. The snow, the same soft rain of particles you have been falling with all night, lands here, and settles and stays. It fills every dip. It buries every ridge given time. It has been falling and settling and leveling for 100 million years and more, and the result is a country of silence floored with the finest, softest sediment, hundreds of meters thick in places, over the bedrock below. Touch down on it now, gently. You will not stir much. The ooze receives you the way a deep quilt receives a dropped feather. Here on the floor, the pace of the world changes so completely that our words for time begin to fail. That sediment under you accumulates, in the open abyss, at around a centimeter every 1,000 years. Less, in the emptiest places. The top centimeter of mud beneath your hand is the complete story of the last 10 centuries. Everything since the year 1000, the entire age of cathedrals and empires and steamships and satellites, is one finger width of soft gray snow down here. A meter down in the ooze, you are touching the age of the dinosaurs' grandchildren. The abyssal plain does not experience history. It files it. And strewn across this plain in some regions lie some of the strangest ordinary objects on Earth. Manganese nodules, dark lumps of metal the size of pebbles of potatoes lying loose on the mud like a crop someone forgot to gather, millions upon millions of them, sometimes carpeting the floor to the horizon. Nobody put them there. They grow. Metal dissolved in seawater settles out, unimaginably slowly in layers around a seed, a shark tooth, a fleck of bone, a grain of sand. They grow at a few millimeters per million years. A nodule the size of your fist has been quietly assembling itself since before there was grass on Earth. Hold that one a moment. Grass is younger than the potato-sized rock at the bottom of the sea. When people say the deep is timeless, they are not being poetic. The deep simply runs on a different clock, and it is the truest clock this planet keeps. Life is here too, and it is not what anyone expected. The abyssal plain looked to the first explorers like it must be a desert. It is closer to a very slow, very sparse meadow. Sea cucumbers, soft, unhurried vacuum cleaners of the deep, graze the top film of the ooze in their thousands, some walking on tube feet, some, wonderfully, able to lift off and drift like slow zeppelins to a fresh patch of mud. Brittle stars lace their arms across the sediment. Glass sponges, built of actual silica, of the stuff of glass, stand like delicate vases. Some of them alive, it is believed, for 10,000 years and more, which would make certain sponges on the dark floor among the oldest living animals this world has. Anemones bloom on old whale bones like flowers on a fence post. And everywhere, on every abyssal plain on Earth, live the xenophiaphores, and I bring them up mostly because it is a joy to say slowly. Xenophiophore, it is a single cell. One cell like an amoeba except the size of your open hand. The largest single-celled creatures on the planet, spread across the deep floor by the countless millions, each one quietly gluing itself a little castle of sediment grains to live in. A single cell that builds a house. They are fragile and ancient, and no one had any idea they mattered until we looked properly. And it turned out the deep floor is dotted with them the way a night sky is dotted with stars. And small fish shelter in their castles, and eggs are laid in them. And the largest habitat on Earth turns out to be, in part, furnished by its protozoa. And the abyss keeps one landscape so strange, and so strangely familiar, that explorers who found it doubted their own cameras. In certain places, in the Gulf of Mexico and a few seas beyond, there are lakes at the bottom of the ocean. I will say that again, slowly, because it deserves it. Lakes. Underwater. pools of water lying within the water with defined shorelines and gentle beaches of mussel shells, and surfaces that ripple when disturbed, and even, in the biggest ones, slow waves that lap their shores. They exist because ancient buried salt beds seep brine so dense, 4 or 5 times saltier than the sea, that it cannot mix with the ocean above it. It pools in hollows of the floor and lies there, a lake within the sea, with the abyss for a sky. Robots have hovered at their edges and filmed the shoreline curving away into the dark, mussels crowding the brink like reeds around a pond. The deep sea has lakefront property. Nothing you dream tonight will be stranger than that, and that is real, and it is down there now, still and silver, holding its shoreline in the dark. The abyss, in short, was never empty. It is a slow country. Everything here happens at a 10th speed, a 100th speed, and none of it has ever once been in a rush, and all of it has been getting along fine, in the dark, without a single sunrise, since before anything walked on land. Lie on the plain a while and let its clock hold yours. A centimeter of time per 1,000 years. There is no version of hurry that survives contact with this floor. Whatever was urgent in your day is, by the accounting of the place you are lying in right now, too brief to register at all. The abyss will not remember this century particularly. It is not unkind. It is simply very, very old and very calm, and it extends that calm to everything that visits, including tonight. You. But this plain, wide as it is not the end of the going down. Out past the edge of the abyssal country, the floor of the world does something one last, extraordinary thing. It opens. Ahead of us lies a trench. Somewhere out on these plains, and on the slopes above them, lie the ships. It is worth drifting past them quietly, because nothing on earth gives the depth of the sea a human scale the way they do. You know the famous one. The great liner that struck the ice in 1912 rests on an abyssal plain in the North Atlantic, in 2 pieces, upright in the mud. She sits 3,800 meters down, and for 73 years that was deep enough to hide her completely. Expeditions looked and failed. Sonar swept and missed. 3,800 meters of dark water kept the most famous ship in the world hidden for most of a century, until at last, in 1985, a towed camera sled passing in the night caught the unmistakable round face of a boiler in its lights. And the sea, after keeping its secret for a lifetime, quietly handed it back. Now here is the fact I actually brought you here for. On tonight's road, 3,800 meters, the depth that swallowed the century's most searched-for ship, the depth that still requires the world's finest submarines to visit, is barely a third of the way down. When you and I crossed that depth tonight, we were still in the upper midnight, with the anglerfish and the falling snow, with 7 kilometers of ocean still below us. The deepest wreck ever found, a warship from the 1940s, lies nearly 7,000 meters down in a Pacific trench slope, and even that is well short of where you are lying now. Human history, all of it, every ship we ever lost, fits comfortably in the upper half of the sea. The deep is gentle with what it receives. Down where the wrecks lie there is no surf to break them, no storm to scatter them, only the cold, the dark, and the patient chemistry of the water. The great liner is being tidied away not by violence but by appetite, by iron-eating microbes that drape her railings in slow orange icicles of rust, a work of unmaking measured in decades and centuries, the abyss doing what it does with everything, filing her, particle by particle, into the mud and the record. Sea anemones bloom on the davits. Radial fish patrol the grand staircase. A ship built to cross the surface in 6 days has instead become a reef and a landmark and a library in a country with no weather, where nothing further will ever happen to her except the snow. Sailors used to speak of the bottom of the sea the way people speak of oblivion. Lost to the deep, they said. Gone, but you have been to the bottom of the sea tonight, or nearly, and you know better now. Nothing that reaches the deep floor is lost. It is exactly the opposite. Everything that reaches the deep floor is kept. The deep is not where things vanish. It is where they are finally, permanently, carefully put away in the stillest archive there is, with the snow settling over them at a centimeter per 1,000 years, and the long current filing passed on its 1,000-year rounds, like a librarian with a lamp. Let the ships rest. The trench is near now, and the floor is beginning, very gently, to lean toward it. While we drift toward the trench, across the last of the wide gray plain, I want to tell you the story of how humanity first properly met this place. Because for almost all of history, the world you have been sinking through tonight was not merely unexplored. It was believed, by serious people, to be dead. In the early 19th century, a respected naturalist studied the creatures of the Aegean Sea, dredging deeper and deeper, and found that life thinned out the farther down he sampled. Fewer animals, then fewer still. He extended the line on his graph, as scientists do, and declared that below about 550 meters, the ocean must be lifeless, a dead zone covering most of the planet. He called it the azoic theory, the theory of no life, and it felt so reasonable that it settled over science like a blanket. No light, unimaginable pressure, freezing cold. Of course, nothing lived there. Why would anything live there? The theory had one small problem, which grew larger with time. Things kept coming up. A sounding line surfaced from 3 kilometers down bearing brittle stars clinging to the rope. Engineers hauling up a broken telegraph cable from the deep Mediterranean found it crusted with corals and shellfish that had grown on it in place, far below the supposed line of death. The dead zone kept being caught breathing. And so, in the 1870s, the Royal Society of London and the Royal Navy did something magnificent. They took a small warship, removed almost all of her guns, and filled her instead with laboratories, microscopes, thousands of glass sample jars, and 250 kilometers of sounding rope. She was called HMS Challenger. Remember the name because the deepest place on Earth is named after her, and we are on our way to it tonight. Challenger left England just before Christmas of 1872 with about 240 sailors and scientists aboard, and she did not come home for 3.5 years. In that time, she wandered the whole world's oceans, Atlantic, Southern, Pacific, nearly 130,000 kilometers under sail and steam, and at station after station, hundreds of them, her crew did the same patient things. Stop the ship, lower the line, measure the depth, haul the dredge across the floor of an unknown world, and bring up whatever the dark would give. It was, by every account, spectacularly boring work. Picture it kindly for a moment, because it is one of the great boring achievements of our species. A wooden ship rolling gently in the middle of the Pacific, 1,000 miles from anywhere. The winch turning for hours as kilometers of rope go down, and hours more as they come back up. Sailors leaning on the rail, waiting. Some of the crew deserted over the years, worn out by the repetition, and honestly, one understands. And then the dredge breaks the surface, streaming mud, and is swung aboard and tipped out on deck, and out of the gray ooze come creatures no human eye has ever seen. Glass sponges like woven light, sea cucumbers from 5 kilometers down, strange pale fish from a country that was supposed to be dead. Again and again, station after station, ocean after ocean, the dredge came up carrying the same quiet message. Alive, alive, alive. By the voyage's end, the azoic theory was not so much disproven as buried at sea. Challenger's scientists cataloged thousands upon thousands of new species, and the full report of the expedition ran to 50 volumes and took 19 years to publish, and it founded, more or less single-handedly, the science of oceanography. Every research vessel at sea tonight, and there are hundreds, is a descendant of that patient, rolling ship. And one day in March of 1875, in the Western Pacific, between Guam and the islands to the south, Challenger stopped for a routine sounding, and the rope went down and kept going, past every depth they had ever measured. When the weight finally touched bottom, the reading was over 8 kilometers. The men on deck that day had found, with a rope and a lump of metal, the doorway to the deepest place on Earth. They noted it carefully in the log and sailed on, having no way of knowing, and no way of finding out, what lay down there in the dark beneath their keel. The spot is called the Challenger Deep now, after the ship. It waits at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and it is where you and I finish our journey tonight. One more small thing about that expedition, my favorite of all of it. Among the crew was a young steward's assistant named Joe, who painted watercolors of the voyage. And in the expedition's records, alongside the depth tables and the careful drawings of new species, there survive his little paintings of ordinary days. Laundry drying in the rigging. The ship at anchor off a green island. Men fishing off the stern at sunset. Humanity went to meet the greatest darkness on its planet, and it went the way we go everywhere, with note-taking and patience and someone quietly painting the laundry. The rope, the mud, the jars, the years of rolling swell, that is how the deep was won. Not stormed, outweighted. The abyss respects nothing else, and it respects that completely. We are nearly at the edge now. The plane beneath us has begun, very gently, to tilt. Before the floor tilts us into the trench, the deep has one more secret to show you, and it is the biggest one it ever kept. To see it, we drift sideways for a little while, off our straight road down, toward one of those great underwater mountain seams we spoke of earlier, the ridges where the floor of the ocean is slowly being born. Because down here, along the seams of the world, there are springs. In 1977, a small research submarine carrying geologists dove off the Galapagos Islands, 2.5 kilometers down, chasing a hunch about warm water rising from the seafloor. They expected, at most, some interesting chemistry. What their lights found instead has been called, without much exaggeration, the most important biological discovery of the 20th century. Rising from the black floor were chimneys, rock towers venting hot, shimmering water into the freezing dark. And crowded around those chimneys, in the middle of what everyone had agreed was a starving desert, was a garden. Clams the size of dinner plates in beds thousands strong. Pale crabs picking their way between them, shrimp in drifts, and everywhere, swaying gently in the warm shimmer like a field of terrible, wonderful flowers, tube worms. Giant tube worms, white stalks taller than a person, crowned with feathery plumes of the deepest red, thousands of them together, thriving, luxuriant, packed as dense as any meadow in June. The geologists, who had brought no biologists because no one imagined needing any, radioed the surface in something close to disbelief. One of them later admitted they preserved the first specimens in the only alcohol aboard, which was the crew's vodka. Here is why this mattered so much, told slowly. Until that dive, we believed all life on Earth ran, at the very bottom of every food chain, on sunlight. Plants eat light, everything else eats plants, or eats the things that eat plants. Even the deep sea, midnight zone, and abyss and all, lives on the snow of the sunlit world falling from above, the sun's economy delivered late and cold, but the sun's economy all the same. One energy source, one tree of life growing out of one buried root of light. That was the deal on planet Earth. The vents broke the deal. The animals of the vents do not live on sunlight, late or otherwise. They live on the planet itself. Inside those giant tube worms, which have no mouth, no stomach, no gut at all, live trillions of bacteria that feed on the chemicals dissolved in the vent water, the sulfurous breath of the hot rock below, and turn that chemical energy into food, the way plants turn light into food. The worm keeps the bacteria. The bacteria feed the worm. An entire ecosystem, crabs and clams and shrimp and fish, stacked on top of microbes that eat the inside of the earth. The sun, it turns out, is optional. Life found a second route. It had been down there, flowering in the dark, for hundreds of millions of years, while every philosopher and biologist in history walked around above it, certain that light was the price of admission to being alive. And the vents themselves are gentle marvels when you drift close, at a respectful distance from the heat. The water pouring from the tallest chimneys, the ones explorers called black smokers, comes out at 300 or 400 degrees, hot enough to melt lead, yet it does not boil because the pressure of the deep holds it liquid, and within a meter or two it has mixed into the eternal cold and settled back to stillness. The chimneys build themselves, minerals settling out of the hot water layer by layer, and some grow to the height of a 20-story building before, eventually, they go quiet. Around each active vent, in a ring only a few meters wide, life crowds shoulder to shoulder in numbers the open abyss cannot dream of. An oasis the size of a garden, on a plain the size of a continent, in the dark. The shrimp at some Atlantic vents have given up eyes in the ordinary sense, but they keep a patch on their backs that can sense the faintest glow, and here is a detail to hold gently as you get sleepier. The vents glow. Very, very dimly, mostly from the sheer heat of the water, a whisper of light in a place the sun never reached, and it may be that the shrimp can see it, the way you can see the ember of a fire from across a dark field, which means that even at the bottom of the lightless ocean, at the springs of the underworld, there is, after all, a hearth, and things gather at it. Not every spring in the deep runs hot and black. Far from the volcanic seams, on a drowned mountain in the mid-Atlantic, explorers found a different kind of place and called it the Lost City. Its towers are not black smokers, but pale spires, white and ivory and bone, some 60 meters tall, built not by volcanic fire, but by a gentler chemistry between seawater and the deep rock itself. Their water seeps out warm, not scalding, and milky with minerals, and the spires stand in the dark like a cathedral quarter abandoned by everyone except the microbes that love it. The Lost City has been standing, and slowly growing, for perhaps 120,000 years. There were white towers in the dark Atlantic before there was a single city on the surface of the Earth. And chemistry, very like the lost cities, is one of the leading candidates for the kind of place where life could have begun. It may be that the first home of everything looked like this: quiet towers, warm seep, no sun, standing room only for guests a millionth of a millimeter tall. And springs make nurseries, too. Off the coast of California, 3 kilometers down on the flank of an extinct undersea volcano, cameras found what researchers now call the octopus garden. Thousands upon thousands of round pearl-colored octopuses, the largest gathering of octopuses known anywhere on Earth, settled together on the warm rock where gentle heat seeps up from below. They are mothers, nearly all of them. Each one sits curled over her clutch of eggs, arms wrapped around her own small future, and the warmth of the rock speeds the eggs along through the cold years of brooding. Seen from above, they look like a field of pale flowers, closed for the night. Thousands of patient mothers, holding still in the dark, in a place the sun has never seen, each one keeping her small vigil beside a warm stone. The deep sea does not only host life, it tucks life in. Some scientists think places exactly like this, warm, mineral-rich springs on a dark seafloor, may be where life on Earth first began 4 billion years ago. It is only a hypothesis, argued about the way all good ideas are. But hold it as a bedtime possibility. It may be that everything, the forests, the whales, the reefs, the birds, your own drowsy mind listening to this voice, is descended from something that first stirred in the warm dark at the bottom of an ocean, beside a spring, in a place with no light at all. The deep may not be the strange edge of the living world. The deep may be its birthplace, and the sunlit surface, with all its noise and color, just something life got up to later. In which case tonight, drifting down in the dark, you are not leaving home. You are visiting it. Enough of the springs. The trench is waiting, and the floor is tilting, and the last country of the night lies below. Below 6,000 meters, the ocean keeps its last and least visited country. Scientists call it the Hadal Zone, named for Hades, the old god of the underworld, which sounds forbidding until you learn what the place is actually like, at which point the name starts to feel like a joke the deep is telling. We will get there. First, the shape of the thing. The Hadal Zone is not a layer spread across the whole ocean, the way the others were. The wide floor of the world mostly stops at the Abyssal Plains. The Hadal country exists only in the trenches, long, narrow canyons where the floor plunges again, kilometers deeper, like crevices in the bottom of an already deep lake. There are a few dozen of them, most strung around the rim of the Pacific, and they are enormous beyond easy imagining, hundreds of kilometers long, and yet so narrow, relatively, that on a globe they are just fine, dark pencil lines. All the Hadal deeps on Earth together add up to a small fraction of the seafloor. They are the attics and cellars of the planet. Almost nobody goes, everything stays. And a trench is not simply a hole. It is a place where the planet is doing something. The floor of the ocean, remember, is being born all the time at those glowing seams in the middle of the seas, spreading outward, a few centimeters a year, about the speed your fingernails grow. But Earth does not get bigger. So somewhere, old floor has to leave. The trenches are where it leaves. At a trench, one great plate of the Earth's crust bends down and slides with geological patience beneath its neighbor, returning to the hot interior of the planet after 100 million years or so out in the cold. The trench is the crease in that bend. The deepest places on Earth are not scars or accidents. They are the planet quietly recycling itself, one fingernail width a year. I like to say that slowly because you could not build a better lullaby fact if you tried. The floor you are sinking toward tonight is itself sinking. Everything down here is on its way down: the water's snow, the whale falls, the nodules, the floor itself, all of it descending at its own pace, from the flake that takes a week to the plate that takes an age. You, drifting off in your bed, are in step with the entire planet. Going down, gently, is the most natural motion this world knows. So let us tip over the rim of the greatest trench of all, the Mariana, in the western Pacific, east of the Philippines, south of Japan. The abyssal plain behind you fades. The walls, far away on either side, are the gentlest slopes, not cliffs, and between them the dark goes down and down and down. 7,000 meters. Pressure, 700 atmospheres, and still life. This surprised everyone. Here live the Hadal snailfish, the deepest fish anyone has ever confirmed, and they are the correction to every nightmare the deep sea ever inspired. No teeth to speak of, no lantern, no fangs, no armor. A Hadal snailfish looks like a large, pale tadpole made of soft pink glass, gentle-faced, almost translucent, its little heart visible through its sides. It noses through the dark, eating small crustaceans, entirely at ease under pressure that would crush a naval submarine like a paper cup. The deepest fish on Earth, the animal that lives closer to the underworld than any other backbone creature, looks like something you would win at a fair. It has never seen light. It is doing perfectly well. Down at the harshest address on the planet, evolution's answer was not a monster. It was softness. The final boss of the ocean is soft and small and faintly pink, and I find that one of the most consoling facts I know. Deeper still, 8,000 meters. Somewhere near here is the fish's limit, not for lack of nerve, but for chemistry. Below a certain depth, the pressure interferes with the very proteins bodies are built from, and fish, as far as we know, simply cannot be made to work. So the last stretch of the descent belongs to simpler, sturdier folk. The amphipods, little shrimp-like creatures, most no bigger than a bean, that swarm the deepest floors in their millions. Drop anything edible into a trench, and out of the dark they come, unhurried but certain, the housekeepers of the underworld, and in an hour the gift is found, and in a day it is gone, tidied politely away. Some Hadal amphipods have learned a chemical trick to keep their shells from dissolving in the deep's hungry water. Others carry, in their tissues, traces of the surface world, because everything, in the end, arrives here. The trench is the bottom of every staircase. The whole ocean above, layer upon layer, all of it eventually sifts down to these narrow floors, and the amphipods receive it all, patiently, like porters at the last hotel on the road. The amphipods of the deepest trenches hold one more secret worth admiring as you pass through their country. Their bodies, like all bodies, are built of proteins, delicate folded machines that the pressure down here would ordinarily squeeze out of shape. So Hadal creatures carry, in their tissues, high doses of a small steadying molecule, a kind of molecular chaperone, that braces the machinery against the weight of the water, the way a careful hand steadies a stack of cups. The deeper the animal lives, the more of it the animal carries. Chemists measured this gradient down the trenches. Anim darkness, this complete stops being a thing that surrounds you and becomes simply the condition of the world, the way silence is the condition of an empty house at night. Nothing in it is hiding. There is nothing left to hide from. The Hadal Deep is, by any honest measure, one of the calmest places that exists. No storms have ever reached here. No day has ever broken. The temperature has not meaningfully changed since before humans existed. If you wanted to design a room for perfect, undisturbed rest, you would design something very like the bottom of a trench. Hades, it turns out, keeps the quietest house on Earth. 10,000 meters. Almost there now. Below you, at last, the floor is rising to meet us, pale in imagination, soft as everything down here is soft. And so we come to the last 100 meters of the ocean, and the end of the going down. The deepest surveyed point in all the oceans of the world lies in the southwestern end of the Mariana Trench, in a slot of the seafloor named after a sailing ship, the Challenger Deep. Its floor sits close to 10,935 meters below the surface, give or take the handful of meters that experts still politely argue over. Nearly 11 kilometers, just under 7 miles. Let us settle down onto it together, and while we sink this last stretch, let me give that number a body, because numbers this size slide off the mind, and this one deserves to be held. If you could set Mount Everest down into the Challenger Deep, base on the floor, its summit, the highest rock our planet lifts into the sky, the place where climbers stand in bottled oxygen above the clouds, would still be about 2 kilometers underwater. You could stack the tallest building on Earth on top of Everest, and the sea would swallow that too, with room to spare. Every landscape you have ever stood in, every mountain you have ever seen, fits inside this depth with sky left over. The Grand Canyon, top to bottom, is a sixth of the way down. Or measure it in time, our favorite unit tonight. The flakes of marine snow drifting past you settle at a few dozen meters a day. A flake that lets go of the sunlight zone above the Mariana Trench will fall for the better part of a year before it lands where you are about to land. There is snow around you now that began falling last winter. And the pressure here, at full depth, deserves one honest sentence spoken calmly. It is about 1,100 atmospheres, 8 tons pressing on every square inch, the weight of a small car balanced on your thumbnail, or, if you prefer the classic image, roughly 100 elephants standing politely on your head. And yet, as we have learned all the way down, this is a number about machines and air pockets, not about the residents. To the amphipods drifting around you, to the sea cucumbers below, to the microbes asleep in the mud, this pressure is simply the shape of home, as unremarkable to them as the weight of the atmosphere is to you. Nothing here is being crushed. Everything here is being held. Touchdown. The floor of the Challenger Deep is a plain of pale, yellowish-gray ooze, soft as anything on Earth, fine as flour, the finished archive of the whole ocean above it. When landers touch it, they raise a slow ghost of silt that hangs and drifts and settles again over minutes, because even dust cannot hurry here. In every direction, the floor runs level into the dark. It is, by the testimony of those who have seen it, overwhelmingly, almost movingly, plain. The deepest place on Earth looks like a snowfield at night. The bottom of the world is a quiet, pale nowhere, and there is nothing down here that wishes anyone ill, because there is nothing down here at all except mud and patience and a scattering of small, soft lives going about their business at the bottom of every staircase there is. 3 times, human beings have made this trip in person and stood, so to speak, where you are lying now. The first time was in January of 1960. 2 men, Jacques Piccard, a Swiss engineer whose father had designed the craft, and Don Walsh, a young United States Navy lieutenant, climbed into a steel sphere barely 2 meters across, hung beneath a giant float of gasoline, a vessel called the Bathyscaphe Triste, and simply, slowly sank. The descent took nearly 5 hours. They ate chocolate bars on the way down. Near the bottom, one of the outer window panes cracked with a bang that shook the sphere, and the 2 of them looked at each other, decided the crack was survivable, and kept going. When they finally settled onto the floor, 7 miles of black water over their heads, they shook hands. They stayed only about 20 minutes, stirred a great cloud of silt, peered out at the pale floor, and thought they saw, gliding away at the edge of their light, a small flat fish, a detail scientists have doubted ever since, and which the 2 of them cheerfully defended for the rest of their lives. Then they dropped their ballast and rose, back up through every layer you and I have fallen through tonight, and surfaced into the sunlight as the only 2 human beings who had ever touched the planet's true floor. And then, for over half a century, no one went back. The moon received 12 visitors before the Challenger Deep received its 3rd. The 3rd came in March of 2012, and he arrived, fittingly, in a machine he had helped design himself, a slender green vertical torpedo of a submarine that fell through the dark like a knife. He was a film director. James Cameron, the man who made a movie about the Titanic and then spent years of his life, and a fortune of his own money learning to visit places deeper than Titanic could dream of. He made the descent alone, folded into a sphere so small he could not straighten his legs, and he fell for 2.5 hours, and he spent hours on the bottom, driving slowly across the pale plain, filming, collecting, describing what he saw in a calm, careful voice to the surface far above. Asked afterward what it was like down there, he did not speak of monsters or terror. He spoke of how utterly alone it was. Desolate, he said. Lunar. Beyond the ordinary world. He said it felt like, in one day, going to another planet and coming back. Since then, a handful of others have followed, in sturdier craft built for repeat visits, mapping the deep pools of the trench, carrying scientists down and back on a schedule, and the Challenger Deep has slowly become what every frontier eventually becomes, a place humans go carefully, rather than a place humans cannot go. There are people alive tonight who have been to the bottom of the sea more often than most of us have been camping. But no one lives there. No one stays. The visits are hours long, pinpricks of light and curiosity in a night 7 miles thick and millions of years old. Every submarine rises. Every lander is hauled home. And when the last light lifts away from the floor and dwindles upward like a rising star, the Challenger Deep returns to what it has always been. A pale plain, in perfect darkness, in perfect cold, in a silence padded by 7 miles of water, where the snow falls slower than seasons, and the amphipods make their patient rounds, and the mud files the centuries away 1 finger width at a time. That is what is really at the bottom of the ocean. Not a monster, not a mystery with teeth. A quiet, cold, endless snowfield minding its own business at the foot of the world. You have reached the deepest place there is. There is nowhere further down. Every journey you have ever taken ended somewhere on the way here, and tonight, for once, you have gone all the way to the floor of everything and found it soft. Rest here a moment. You have certainly earned the lying still. Before we rise, while you lie on the softest floor on Earth with 7 miles of ocean tucked over you, let me tell you, quietly, what this dark water does for you. Because the deep sea is not a stranger, and it is not merely scenery for a bedtime journey. It is, in several very real senses, the reason you are comfortable tonight. Start with your next breath. Somewhere in the top of that 7 miles of water, countless small drifting living things, the plankton, are photosynthesizing, or will be when their side of the planet turns toward morning, and between them, the ocean's smallest gardeners produce about half of all the oxygen this world makes. Every second breath you have taken tonight, roughly speaking, was a gift of the sea. You have been breathing ocean all your life, in alternation with the forests, and never once had to say please. And the deep is the planet's cellar, in the most practical way. The ocean has quietly absorbed a great share of the extra warmth of the modern world, and swallowed a great share of what our chimneys and engines breathe out, and it hands that burden down, layer by layer, into the cold storage you are lying in now, where the slow clock runs. The deep sea is doing you favors, huge, silent, thankless favors, at this very moment, on a scale no machine ever built could approach. The calmest place on Earth is also one of the hardest working. It just works the way it does everything. Slowly, in the dark, without being asked. And then there is the current. I have saved the current for last, for the rising, because it is the sleepiest great fact I know about this planet. The waters of the deep are not still. They move, all of them together, in one vast, slow circulation that oceanographers call the global conveyor. In the far North Atlantic in winter, surface water grows so cold and so salty that it becomes heavier than the water beneath it, and it sinks, whole seas of it, sliding gently down into the dark and begins to travel. Along the deep floor of the Atlantic, south, past the equator, around the great Southern Ocean, branching into the Indian, into the Pacific, creeping along the bottoms of the world, rising slowly in far places, warming, returning along the surface to sink again. One connected, planet-sized river flowing through every ocean at once, mostly in total darkness. And here is its pace. The water that sinks into the deep on one winter night in the North Atlantic will not complete its journey around the world and return to where it began for about 1,000 years. 1,000 years. There is water arriving at the bottom of the North Pacific tonight that left the surface around the time of the Vikings. It has been traveling in the dark without pause since before your language sounded the way it sounds, and it was never once late. Because nothing in the deep can be late. The deep does not keep appointments, it keeps eras. You live on a planet that stirs itself once per millennium, like a great sleeper turning over. And that slow turn steadies everything. It ferries warmth to cold places and coolness to warm ones. It is one of the reasons this world's weather, for all its moods, stays livable, century over century. The habitability of Earth rests, in real part, on a current that moves too slowly to see, in water too dark to see it in. The world is held together by patient things. It always has been. So, time to rise. You may leave the floor now gently. It will not miss you, and it will not forget you either, because the mud files everything, and one particle of tonight will still be down there, in the archive, 1,000,000 years from now. Rise slowly. There is no hurry in either direction on this road. Past the pale snowfield, up out of the trench, its walls sliding by unseen. Past the springs and their warm gardens, the tube worms swaying goodnight. Up across the Abyssal Plain, where the potato-sized rocks are growing at their few millimeters per million years, exactly as fast as ever. Past the whale fall and its patient village, the bones flowering in the dark. Up through the midnight country, where the anglerfish holds up her one small star, and the giant squid drifts like a duchess, and the snow falls upward past you now, or seems to, as you overtake it. Up through the twilight, where the great nightly migration is settling back down for the day. Trillions of small commuters sinking home to the gloom as you rise past them. The two of you exchanging places one more time, as always, no words needed. Up into the failing blue. The water warms around you degree by degree. The pressure eases its embrace, so gradually there is no moment you could point to. Somewhere above, the ceiling of the world appears, a faint silver shimmer, widening, brightening, until it is everything, and then, softly, you are through it. Night air, the smell of salt. The beach where we began, the sand still faintly warm, the sky still thick with stars. Behind you the sea breathes in and out, 7 or 8 waves a minute, the oldest rhythm there is, and now you know, as very few people ever really know, what is underneath that sound. 11 kilometers of patience. Snowfields and lantern keepers, springs and slow rivers. A whole silent world doing perfectly well, holding up the one you live in. The ocean will still be going down long after tonight. The snow will fall, the current will creep, the amphipods will make their rounds, the mud will file the years. None of it needs watching. None of it needs you to stay awake, and neither does anything else now, until morning. Sleep now, somewhere past the last of the light. Good night from Cosmos at midnight.